Why do people work?
People usually work to get the things that they need to live. The most basic needs are food, clothing, and shelter. In some places, people grow their own food, make their own clothes, and build their own shelters, living much as their ancestors have for thousands of years. In other places, people earn money to buy those things. Work in industrialized, or developed, nations frequently takes place in office buildings or factories. While some people still make their livings as farmers. The economies of such countries are based on advanced technologies and large-scale manufacturing, which create products and services that earn workers more money than people can make in the less industrial or developing countries of the world, where farming is the main industry, and most farmers can barely grow enough food for their own families. People who live in industrialized nations like the United States, Canada, Japan, Australia, and many countries in Europe are able to buy far more than the basic things they need to live. They are able to make their lives easier and safer by paying for clean water, electricity, good medical care, reliable transportation, and much more. Those who live in developing countries, located mainly in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, still struggle to acquire the most basic necessities. It may be hard to believe, but it's nonetheless true that half of the world's people are malnourished, don't have enough of the right foods to be healthy, and 80% live in substandard housing, homes that are not clean and safe.
Why does my skin turn red or brown if I stay out in the sun for a long time?
A sunburn occurs when your skin is overexposed to the rays of the sun. Too much sunlight inflames surface skin and the tissues beneath it, just like a regular burn from touching something hot, causing redness, hotness, tenderness, and swelling. In bad cases, blisters may even appear as the body begins to form and protect new skin to replace the skin damaged by sunburn. Usually people who have fair, or light, skin get sunburns. Such people have less melanin in their skin, the pigment that determines skin color, as well as hair and eye color. Melanin is made in special cells called melanocytes. People with light skin have fewer of these. Sun exposure makes melanocytes produce more melanin in an effort to darken skin, protecting it from damage by shading its deeper layers. This process creates what we know as a suntan. Dark-skinned people can produce a lot of melanin fast, tanning quickly when they are in the sun. But light-skinned people usually get burned before their melanocytes can produce the amount of melanin needed for protection. Fair people can get tans only if they do it very slowly, exposing themselves to the sun a little bit at a time. Scientists think that various groups of people around the world developed Different skin colors because of where their ancestors once lived. In hot, sunny places, people develop dark skin for protection. In cooler places, where sunlight was not as strong, people developed lighter skin.
Why are there parking meters?
Finding a place to park in a big city is usually a problem because land space is so limited. In fact, one of the reasons that most big cities have mass transportation systems is because they don't have enough space for all the people who live, work, and visit there to use and park cars. Parking meters first used in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. In 1935 were invented to help solve the traffic and parking problems of big cities. By charging drivers for parking spaces and limiting their time there. Parking meters encourage people to leave more quickly, which allows other drivers to use the spaces. The devices also encourage people to use public transportation to and from and within a city because parking is so expensive. This, in turn, reduces the number of cars on city streets, cutting down on traffic, noise, and pollution. Another benefit of parking meters is that the money they bring in can be used for city needs.
Will I be a parent someday?
Deciding whether or not to have children is something every adult has to decide for him or herself. Statistics of married people in the United States indicate that you have a good chance of becoming a mother or father someday. More than half of all married couples in America have children. Of course, it isn't necessary to marry to become a parent, but many people do. The average American family has 2 children, though some families have 1 child and others have more. If a man and a woman cannot have a baby for health reasons, they may be able to adopt a child whose own biological mother and father cannot take care of him or her, and raise the child as their own. It really makes no difference where a child comes from when it comes to being a mother and a father. Lots of people can produce babies physically, but it is the caring for and the worrying about and the endless love for their children that truly make people mothers and fathers.
What is pollution?
Pollution refers to excessive amounts of waste, much of which contains harmful poisons that are released into the environment, air, water, and soil. Pollution is usually caused by people, more specifically it is caused by the waste produced by the cars we drive, the factories that make the things we buy, the power plants that produce the gas and electricity we use, and even the farms that grow the food we eat. Pollution has been a problem ever since large numbers of people occupied a relatively small space. During the 1800s and 1900s, however, as the world became increasingly crowded and more factories were built, environmental pollution became a serious issue. Air pollution is caused primarily by the burning of fuel. Gas-powered transportation methods, airplanes, cars, boats, and trains are the biggest culprits. The amount of fuel required to heat and cool homes and other buildings also contributes huge amounts of air pollution. Air pollutants damage Earth's atmosphere and harm plants and animals, including humans. Water pollution comes from a variety of sources. Any factory that makes things, toys, tires, steel, creates waste products as well. This waste, filled with toxic chemicals, is often released into bodies of water, including lakes, rivers, and oceans. Other harmful water pollutants include sewage, which is human and animal waste. Most sewage is somewhat filtered in septic tanks and treatment plants. But some raw sewage still gets released into water. The chemicals used to control pests and fertilize plants on farms also ends up in lakes and rivers when rainwater drains from the farmland to the bodies of water. Ships carrying massive quantities of oil have also been responsible for polluting the water. If those ships break apart, the oil spills into the water, killing birds and fish and damaging the shoreline. The world's oceans and rivers can break down some pollutants into forms that are either harmless or beneficial to aquatic life. But when pollution levels become too high, the plants and animals living in the water suffer. Land pollution comes primarily from garbage. Some types of garbage, paper, plastic, some metals, glass, and so on, are recyclable, meaning they can be processed and reused. Some garbage is biodegradable, which means it will naturally break down into tiny particles that can be reused by the environment. Vast quantities of the garbage we produce, however, is not easily broken down or recycled. Garbage is usually dumped in landfills, and as some things slowly decay, a harmful gas called methane is released into the air. Another source of land pollution are the chemicals used on farms. Some of those chemicals are washed into bodies of water, and some are absorbed by the ground where they can harm various forms of plant and animal life.
Why do people smoke cigarettes?
People smoke cigarettes for the same reasons they do any kind of drug. They like the way it makes them feel. Cigarette tobacco contains nicotine, which is a stimulant that produces an energetic, happy feeling in some people. It can also make people feel relaxed, and for some it decreases appetite. Lots of people start smoking because they want to fit in with a certain group of friends, or because they like the image they present when they light up a cigarette. But while smoking is legal, for those over the age of 18, it has been repeatedly proven to be highly addictive and extremely harmful. In addition to nicotine, cigarettes contain numerous harmful chemicals, like tar and the poisonous gas carbon monoxide. some minor, but highly unattractive. Side effects of smoking include bad breath and permanently discolored teeth and fingers. But these problems pale in comparison to the major health risks of smoking. Cigarette smoking is believed to be the cause of 90% of all cases of lung cancer. And lung cancer causes more deaths each year than any other kind of cancer. Smoking causes many other kinds of cancers too, as well as heart disease and numerous other ailments. If women smoke while pregnant, it can cause problems for the health of the fetus. And babies who live in households where people smoke are at an increased risk of dying from sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS. Hundreds of thousands of people die each year in the United States from smoking-related illnesses, and if those people had never picked up a cigarette in the first place, those illnesses could have been prevented.
What are some of the different energy sources?
The main energy sources used around the world today are oil, coal, and natural gas. These sources of energy are called fossil fuels, so named because they come from the fossilized remains of plants and animals that lived hundreds of millions of years ago. Coal, for example, comes from fossilized plants and trees. A long time ago, as plants and trees died, their remains became buried under the weight of layers of mud or new plants, and they eventually turned into stone. That stone can be cut out from deep, underground coal mines and burned for energy. Fossil fuels are used primarily for transportation: airplanes, cars, trains, and so on, and for heating and cooling houses and other kinds of buildings. Fossil fuels provide a large percentage of the energy consumed around the world. But they are non-renewable resources, meaning that there is a limited amount of each of these types of fuel. And when they are gone, no more can be produced. Because there is a limited supply of fossil fuels. Scientists are continuously exploring other sources of energy that have an unlimited supply. These renewable energy sources are cleaner and have much less of an impact on the environment than non-renewable sources like fossil fuels. Such sources include the sun, solar power, water, hydropower, and wind. The heat of the sun can be captured with solar panels and used to heat homes and offices. It can also generate electricity, which can then be used for a variety of purposes. Flowing water can also produce energy. Usually hydropower plants use a dam on a river to collect water in a reservoir, or large pool. When that water is released to flow downward, it passes through a device called a turbine, which has blades like a giant fan. The force of the water spins the turbine, which then activates a generator, which produces electricity. Turbines are also used to convert the power of wind into electricity. These turbines, with blades like a propeller, are mounted on a tall tower. The wind spins the blades, and, as with hydropower, The spinning of the turbine causes a generator to produce electrical power. Another renewable energy source is called geothermal energy, which uses the heat from just below Earth's surface. This heat can be converted into electricity or used to directly provide heat for buildings. There are many advantages to renewable energy sources, but scientists have yet to solve problems associated with producing these kinds of energy inexpensively and transporting that energy to distant areas. Another important energy source is nuclear energy. Nuclear energy comes from either splitting the nucleus of an atom, called nuclear fission, or combining atomic nuclei, called nuclear fusion. The nuclear energy produced today comes from fission. The process of splitting atoms produces a massive amount of energy that can be used in many different ways. But nuclear fission has some serious disadvantages. The process creates large quantities of hot water that must be cooled. Using expensive machines, before being dumped into lakes or rivers. If water is dumped while still hot, it can cause something called thermal pollution. The hot wastewater raises the temperature of a body of water, disrupting the balance of life in that water and even killing some fish and other creatures. Nuclear fission also produces radioactive waste, which is dangerous to the environment and must be stored safely for long periods of time. The threat of an accident involving a leak of radioactive material is always present at a nuclear power plant.
Why are some flying insects drawn to lights at night?
Scientists aren't exactly sure why this happens. They have noticed that on clear nights, when the moon is visible, fewer insects gravitate to artificial lights. This observation has given rise to a theory, for millions of years. Insects have used the light of the moon, coming from one direction above to guide them during night flight. But artificial lights, which put out rays of illumination in all directions, confuse this ancient navigational system. Flying in a straight line is impossible when an insect is around an artificial light, which causes it to fly in circles.
So why is it called the bald eagle?
Because one meaning of the word bald that is not commonly used anymore refers to white markings. Due to excessive hunting, environmental pollution, and loss of habitat, the bald eagle population became dangerously low at one point, prompting the U.S. Congress to pass a law protecting it. Bald eagles were once listed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as an endangered species, meaning they were close to being extinct. Thanks to the laws protecting it, these birds have rebounded a bit. They are now listed as threatened, which means they are not as close to being extinct as they once were. But their numbers are still few, only about 50,000 in the United States, and it is illegal to hunt them.
What causes a bloody nose?
The mucous membrane that lines your nose has many tiny blood vessels located close to the surface. It is easy to damage one or more of these vessels, resulting in some bleeding from your nose. Sometimes a hard bump on the nose will cause a nosebleed. A cold or infection which can cause crusting that damages the nose lining is another frequent cause. Sometimes the dry air produced by furnaces during winter can dry out the nasal passages and cause a nosebleed. Sometimes the reason for a nosebleed is unknown. Still, while it can be scary and look like a lot of blood is being lost, nosebleeds are generally harmless. The best way to handle a nosebleed is to sit down and lean forward. Leaning back leads to swallowing a lot of blood. Breathe through your mouth and press your thumb on the lower part of your nose on the side that is bleeding. Wait for about 5 minutes, until a blood clot can form on the damaged vessel and stop the nosebleed. An ice pack placed on the bridge of the nose can also help by constricting, or narrowing, blood vessels. Be very careful when handling your nose for about half a day afterward, so that you don't disturb the clot. A nosebleed that doesn't stop after 20 minutes should be treated by a doctor.
Can anything live in a desert?
Plants have developed surprising adaptations to allow them to live in the harsh, dry desert. Many, like cacti, store water in their fleshy stems and have small or no leaves through which water can escape. They have deep, spreading root systems that take advantage of every bit of water. Either above or below the ground, some extending down 50 feet. Other desert plants produce seeds that can lie dormant or inactive for years, springing to life when the rare rainstorm comes. Animals, too, have developed habits allowing them to survive in the desert. Many, for example, rest during the hottest part of the day in burrows dug in rocks or sand, becoming active in the early morning and at night when temperatures cool. And people have had a long history of successfully living in the desert. The ancient Egyptians, who lived in the Sahara Desert along the Nile River, created one of Earth's great civilizations. A source of water in a desert, like a river or an oasis where underground water reaches. The surface can be used to water crops and feed livestock, and life can flourish around it.
What is wind chill?
Wind chill describes the chilling effect that moving air or wind has on the way we feel different temperatures and on the way our bodies react to them. 2 days with the same outdoor temperature will seem quite different if one is very windy and one is not, because the wind carries heat away from the surface of our bodies, making us feel colder. This effect is called the wind chill factor. A wind chill index or chart has been developed that shows how certain wind speeds or velocities make different temperatures feel. In very cold climates it is important to know the wind chill. It tells people who live there how to dress to protect their skin from frostbite, a freezing of the skin that can cause permanent damage.
What is the difference between fur and hair?
While there is some debate about this, most scientists agree that there is no real difference between fur and hair. There are many different kinds of hair. The hair on a dog is different from the hair on a polar bear, which is different from the hair on a person's head. And the hair on a person's head is different from the whiskers on a man's face. But it's all hair. Many fur-covered animals actually have two different kinds of fur, the ground hair, sometimes called secondary hair, which is the dense, soft undercoat of hair, and guard hair, also known as primary hair, which is the longer, coarser outer layer of fur. Ground hair helps the animal maintain its body temperature, while guard hair protects the ground hair from water, snow, or insects. Some animals, like certain kinds of lambs, only have ground hair. And some animals such as horses, primates, a group that includes people, and some dogs have only guard hair. Animal fur has long been used to create clothing for people. At one time, fur outerwear was necessary to protect people from harsh winter weather. In modern times, however, fur coats are a luxury item. Many of the animals whose fur is prized for its beauty and warmth, like minks and foxes, are raised on fur ranches that were set up expressly to produce fur coats to sell.
How does a camera take pictures?
When you press the picture-taking button on a camera, you open the shutter and let light inside for a fraction of a second. The light passes through a lens that focuses it on film, leaving a record there of what the camera saw during that button pressing instant. The film is coated with light-sensitive chemicals that save the impression, but it usually has to be placed into a bath of other chemicals to make an image appear and remain permanently. The film is developed into negatives, on which appear images that look very different than those that were photographed. Dark shades appear light, light shades appear dark, and colors are the opposite of what they should be. But when light passes through these negatives onto special photo paper, which is also developed using chemicals, the images that appear are normal again, exact copies of the photographed scenes. With instant cameras, developing chemicals are contained inside, treating the film right away. A picture pops out on photo paper, its image forming while you wait.
Why do bees and other insects buzz?
The buzzing sounds that insects make are the beating of their wings. Some insects flap their wings slowly, like the butterfly, 8 to 12 beats per second, and make no sound. Others, like the mosquito, beat their wings very fast, at 600 beats per second. The mosquito's buzz sounds more like a high-pitched whine.
Why is it so noisy in big cities?
Big cities are so noisy because a lot of people and activities are confined to a relatively small space. Think about the activities that happen in a small neighborhood: people talking, car motors running, ambulance sirens blaring, and multiply that several times over. Because cities are usually centers of manufacturing, business, government, and culture, they attract large numbers of people who live and work there. Cities are also home to lots of cars and mass transportation vehicles like buses and trains, all of which produce tremendous noise. And noises in a city often seem louder because the sound waves bounce back and forth between the many tall buildings.
How can cows make so much milk?
A cow, like all mammals, produces milk to feed its young. If its calf nurses regularly, the mother cow's mammary glands will produce enough milk to give the baby animal all the food it needs. Gradually a calf will nurse less as grass and other feed makes up more of its diet. A mother cow, in turn, will produce less milk until it is no longer needed. But by milking the cows regularly 2 or 3 times a day, dairy farmers can cause the cows to continue producing milk. Certain breeds of cows are particularly good at milk making, producing 18 to 27 pints, around 2 to 3 gallons, or 10 to 15 liters, each day. A cow's large, round udder, located on its underside, has 4 nipples, or teats, that are squeezed to release stored milk. While once done by hand, milking is done on modern dairy farms by machines with suction hoses, which do the job more quickly and cheaply. Tank trucks collect milk from farms daily and take it to processing plants where it is pasteurized, made germ-free, and used to make dairy products like cheese, butter, and ice cream. While 90% of the world's milk today comes from cows, that was not always the case. Goats and sheep which could graze on vegetation that grew in lands too dry for cows were long used as important sources of milk and dairy products. Their milk, and the milk of other animals like camels, buffalo, yaks, llamas, and reindeer, is still used today, though in small quantities compared to cow's milk. Every mammal makes milk that is different from that of other mammals. Milk that is especially suited to its young and to the environment in which its babies must grow. Reindeer milk, for instance, has 4 times the fat of cow milk because reindeer live in colder climates. and more calories are required for living in wintry surroundings. But all animals' milk shares many basic qualities and is full of vital nutrients.
How long can a person hold his or her breath?
You usually don't have to think much about your breathing because your brain controls it automatically. When you have a lot of carbon dioxide, the waste gas produced by body processes in your blood, your brain gets the message and tells your lungs to exhale and get rid of it. This action then causes you to inhale, drawing in air that eventually delivers oxygen to every cell in your body. This carefully regulated exhaling and inhaling takes place about 10 to 14 times each minute when you are breathing calmly. When you need more oxygen than usual, your brain takes care of that, too. When you're exercising or working hard, your brain tells you to breathe more quickly, taking in 15 to 20 times more air. If that still doesn't deliver all the oxygen that your muscles need, you may run out of breath, which forces you to rest. You will still breathe hard at that point every second or so until your muscles are able to work again. So you can see that trying to stop the automatic way that your brain controls your breathing is nearly impossible. When you hold your breath, carbon dioxide builds up in your blood, unable to exit through your lungs. Not long after that, in less than a minute, your brain will force you to take a deep breath. As hard as you try not to, you may be able to hold your breath a little longer than a minute if you prepare your lungs first, taking several deep breaths to fill them with as much air as possible before you start. With a lot of practice and physical training, some people have been able to hold their breath for a few minutes. Be careful testing your breath holding limits, because at some point the lack of oxygen could make you faint.
Which country is the smallest?
The smallest country in the world is Vatican City. It is located on 108.7 acres, or 44 hectares, which is not even half a square mile, in the city of Rome, Italy. Vatican City is where the central government of the Roman Catholic Church is located. The home of the Pope, who is leader of the Church, is also located there. About 850 people are citizens of Vatican City, which is ruled by the Pope, though a governor and a council actually run it. Vatican City has its own money, postage stamps, flag, and diplomatic corps. Monaco, which is less than 1 square mile, around 2 square kilometers in area, is the second smallest country in the world.
Why do some kids occasionally wet the bed in their sleep?
Usually, when you are asleep and your full bladder sends a message to your brain that it needs to be emptied. Your brain wakes you up so that you can go to the bathroom. But once in a while you sleep through the message and wet the bed. Bedwetting is a common occurrence in children up to about 5 years of age. Because muscle control and nervous systems are still immature then. But older children can have the condition, too, called enuresis, and doctors really don't know why. A lot more boys than girls experience bedwetting when they are older, and it seems to run in families. While challenging to deal with, the condition nearly always goes away by itself before adolescence. If a thorough check by a doctor reveals that no physical abnormality is the cause, a child can do a couple of things to limit bedwetting: drink only small amounts of liquids in the evening, and set an alarm clock to wake up during the night and empty the bladder so that an accident will not occur.
If I eat too much food, will I get fat?
Your body needs food to provide it with the energy it needs to run smoothly and to grow and repair itself. All of this requires calories, which is a measurement of energy. Food provides the calories that make the body run. The amount of calories that a person needs depends a lot on how active he or she is and on whether that individual is still growing. Even though they are smaller than adults, children need comparatively more calories. Because they are so physically active and are always making new body tissue as they grow. If you eat a lot more calories than your body needs for the energy you use each day, your body will store the extra calories as fat. Having a lot of body fat greatly increases your chances of getting a lot of different diseases. The easiest way to guard against being overweight is to lead a physically active life. Keeping fit through regular exercise like bicycling, swimming, or participating in team sports like basketball will burn up the calories you eat, keeping you trim. Regular exercise also keeps joints and muscles flexible and strong and the heart and lungs healthy. Exercise seems to make the brain work better, too. In order to lose weight, you have to eat less and exercise more. If you burn more calories than the amount you take in through food each day, your body will use your stored fat for the energy it needs, and you will lose weight. Increasing your physical activities is one way to accomplish this. Another way is to change your diet. By not eating junk food and drink that are high in fat and sugar but have few of the nutrients that your body needs, you will be able to reduce the calories that you take in. Concentrating on foods that are good for you. But remember, the object of dieting is good health, not skinniness. People who make themselves too thin by not eating enough can have very serious health problems.
Is it okay to tell a secret that someone else told me?
A big part of listening to someone's secret is promising not to tell anyone else. Doing what you promise is a way of showing that you can be trusted. When you tell someone else's secret, it usually indicates that you care more about yourself than about the person who shared the confidence with you. That behavior breaks the basic rule of conduct that helps people get along in the world. Treating others the same way in which you would like to be treated.
Why do I get sick?
When you get sick, part or all of your body isn't working as it should. The cause of sickness can come from the inside your body or from the outside world. Diseases that start on the inside are usually inherited in the genes that you receive from your parents, which make up the master plan that determines how your body will grow and run. Abnormal development or functioning of different body systems is the cause of many chronic, long-lasting diseases. Things in the outside world can cause sickness, too. Poisons in the environment can cause illnesses in people. Not eating the right foods, with their important nutrients, can also cause diseases. But the most common cause of sickness from the outside world is infectious agents. These agents are usually microscopic organisms, living things so small that they can only be seen with the help of microscopes. Like bacteria and viruses, which we commonly refer to as germs. Bacteria and viruses and other microscopic organisms live in the air, water, and soil that make up our world. They are on the things and people we touch and in the food we eat. Many of them are beneficial. Bacteria are needed to make cheese. Some bacteria help vegetables like peas and beans grow. And some bacteria clean the environment and enrich the soil by feeding on dead plants and animals. But there are other microscopic organisms that invade the bodies of plants and animals and people and cause diseases. Your skin is a wonderful protective barrier that keeps a lot of the disease-causing germs that you run into each day from entering your body. Only when you have an opening in your skin like a cut or a scrape are germs likely to enter there. Most germs enter through your mouth and nose, making their way farther into your body through your respiratory or digestive tracts. But even then, certain chemicals in body tissues and fluids keep many harmful germs from causing problems. When an infection does begin, though, with the germs multiplying inside your body, your immune or defense system goes into action to get rid of the foreign organisms. Your white blood cells produce special substances called antibodies that attack and destroy the invaders, helping you to recover. Sometimes it takes several days for your immune system to stop the infection and for your body to repair the damage it caused. But after your illness you will have an immunity to the specific germs that were responsible for your sickness. This means that if the same kind of germs enter your body again, the antibodies already there will destroy them before any illness occurs. By the time you are an adult, you will get far fewer infections than you did as a child. because you will have become immune to many of the common bacteria and viruses in the world. But when you are young and encountering different germs for the first time, you do get sick a lot.
What are some of the different energy sources?
The main energy sources used around the world today are oil, coal, and natural gas. These sources of energy are called fossil fuels, so named because they come from the fossilized remains of plants and animals that lived hundreds of millions of years ago. Coal, for example, comes from fossilized plants and trees. A long time ago, as plants and trees died, their remains became buried under the weight of layers of mud or new plants, and they eventually turned into stone. That stone can be cut out from deep, underground coal mines and burned for energy. Fossil fuels are used primarily for transportation: airplanes, cars, trains, and so on, and for heating and cooling houses and other kinds of buildings. Fossil fuels provide a large percentage of the energy consumed around the world. But they are non-renewable resources, meaning that there is a limited amount of each of these types of fuel. And when they are gone, no more can be produced. Because there is a limited supply of fossil fuels, scientists are continuously exploring other sources of energy that have an unlimited supply. These renewable energy sources are cleaner and have much less of an impact on the environment than non-renewable sources like fossil fuels. Such sources include the sun, solar power, water, hydropower, and wind. The heat of the sun can be captured with solar panels and used to heat homes and offices. It can also generate electricity, which can then be used for a variety of purposes. Flowing water can also produce energy. Usually hydropower plants use a dam on a river to collect water in a reservoir, or large pool. When that water is released to flow downward, it passes through a device called a turbine, which has blades like a giant fan. The force of the water spins the turbine, which then activates a generator, which produces electricity. Turbines are also used to convert the power of wind into electricity. These turbines, with blades like a propeller, are mounted on a tall tower. The wind spins the blades, and, as with hydropower, the spinning of the turbine causes a generator to produce electrical power. Another renewable energy source is called geothermal energy, which uses the heat from just below Earth's surface. This heat can be converted into electricity or used to directly provide heat for buildings. There are many advantages to renewable energy sources, but scientists have yet to solve problems associated with producing these kinds of energy inexpensively and transporting that energy to distant areas. Another important energy source is nuclear energy. Nuclear energy comes from either splitting the nucleus of an atom, called nuclear fission, or combining atomic nuclei, called nuclear fusion. The nuclear energy produced today comes from fission. The process of splitting atoms produces a massive amount of energy that can be used in many different ways. But nuclear fission has some serious disadvantages. The process creates large quantities of hot water that must be cooled. Using expensive machines, before being dumped into lakes or rivers. If water is dumped while still hot, it can cause something called thermal pollution. The hot wastewater raises the temperature of a body of water, disrupting the balance of life in that water and even killing some fish and other creatures. Nuclear fission also produces radioactive waste, which is dangerous to the environment and must be stored safely for long periods of time. The threat of an accident involving a leak of radioactive material is always present at a nuclear power plant.
Do snakes have bones in their bodies?
Snakes have such flexible and winding bodies. It seems strange to think that they have bones under those scales. Snakes do not have any arms or legs, but they do have bones in their skull, and they have a long backbone. The backbone is made up of vertebrae, plural of vertebra, the segments that make up the spinal column in all vertebrates. And a pair of ribs is attached to each vertebra above the tail section. Therefore, very long snakes have more vertebrae, and more ribs than any other kind of animal. Some snakes have more than 400 vertebrae, people have 12. The way the vertebrae fit together allows for swiveling flexibility in both side-to-side and up and down motions, allowing the snake to move the way it does without straining its skeleton.
Why are there traffic lights?
Traffic lights were invented to control the safe flow of traffic on streets. They came into widespread use after the invention of the automobile. Until then, people generally didn't require formal traffic rules and control devices, relying instead on polite behavior and common sense when they traveled. But when fast and noisy motor vehicles began to fill the streets, it became clear that traffic control was needed. Lights that stopped some drivers, while allowing others to proceed, was one way to protect both cars and pedestrians, people on foot, from collisions and to avoid traffic build-ups. The first traffic light was erected in 1868 in downtown London, England. This redand green-tinted gas lantern, hung on a tall iron pole, could be turned in one direction or another by a handle at its base. Of course, at the time, automobiles had not yet been invented. But the number of steam engine vehicles, animal-drawn wagons, and carriages, and pedestrians had become so plentiful at the busy corner at Parliament Square, that a traffic light was needed to prevent accidents. The electric traffic signal was invented by Garrett Morgan, an African-American businessman and inventor, in Cleveland, Ohio. After buying his first automobile, Morgan realized the need for some traffic control at intersections. He invented a traffic light based on the signals used at railroad crossings. He received a patent for it. That is, he registered the invention as his with the government. In 1923, some early traffic signals had red and green lights and a warning buzzer that sounded as the color changed. But as automobile traffic and noise increased, people thought that a visual warning between going and stopping would work better than one that was heard. An amber or yellow light was added to traffic signals to warn drivers to prepare to stop.
Can some animals grow a new limb after one has been cut off?
There are many creatures that have the ability to replace body parts that have been lost. In fact, this process, called regeneration, happens in all living things at some level. Life is not possible without regeneration. Generally, the more complex the organism, the less dramatic the regeneration. Human beings can replace old skin cells with new ones, for example. While a certain species of flatworm can regenerate a new head and tail, basically a whole new worm from any one of its segments. A hydra, a freshwater invertebrate with a tube-like body that has several tentacles at one end, has such amazing regenerative ability that an entirely new hydra can be regrown from just a tiny fragment of the animal. Several insects, if they lose a limb before they reach their adult stage, can grow a new one. Crustaceans like crabs and lobsters can replace lost claws or legs with new ones. Even some vertebrates, which are more highly developed than invertebrates, are capable of some amazing regeneration. Bony fish, a group that includes salmon, tuna, and most other creatures we think of as fish, can regrow a fin, though the group of fish that includes sharks cannot. Some amphibians can replace lost limbs with new ones, while some lizards can grow a new tail if the old one gets cut off. Birds cannot grow new limbs, though their ability to replace old feathers and sometimes beaks with new ones is a type of regeneration. The regeneration that mammals are capable of is more modest. Deer produce new antlers every year, for example, but no mammal can regrow a new limb or tail.
What is the largest fish?
The largest living fish is the whale shark. It usually grows to about 30 feet, 9 meters, in length, but some have been measured at more than 50 feet. 15 meters, long, weighing several tons. A ton is 2,000 pounds, or 908 kilograms. These gentle giants pose little threat to humans, however. They have very small teeth and eat mainly fish and plankton, which are tiny organisms that drift in both salt water and fresh water, providing food for numerous animals. Whale sharks, recognizable by their distinctive skin pattern of small dots and stripes. Swim very slowly, just beneath the surface of the water.
How can scientists tell the age of fossils?
Scientists can learn many things about the conditions on the planet and ancient animal behavior from fossils. They can learn whether an area was once covered by lush forests, for example, or they can determine that some dinosaurs traveled in herds. They can also tell, in many cases, how long ago the fossilized plant or animal lived. One way to narrow down a fossil's age is by seeing what layer, or strata, of rock it appears in. The deepest layers contain the oldest fossils, while the top layers contain the most recent fossils. If they know the history of other fossils found nearby, specifically when these other animals lived, then they can determine the approximate age of newly found fossils. In some cases, scientists can pinpoint the age of a fossil by measuring something called a radioactive isotope. An isotope can be thought of as a version of a chemical element, like hydrogen or carbon, that has a slightly different atomic makeup than other versions of that element. For example, one isotope of hydrogen has one particle, a proton, in the nucleus. Another isotope has two particles, a proton and a neutron. Both are hydrogen, but they are different types of hydrogen. A radioactive isotope is one that is unstable and gives off some radiation. Over time, radioactive isotopes decay, forming a different chemical element altogether. For example, uranium eventually changes into lead. Scientists know how long it takes for various radioactive isotopes to decay. They discuss this time in terms of the isotope's half-life, or the amount of time it takes for half of the isotope to decay. If a radioactive isotope has a 1,000-year half-life, then half of it will have decayed in 1,000 years and all of it will have decayed, or turned into another element, in 2,000 years. So let's say a scientist measures the amount of a radioactive isotope in a chunk of rock. Knowing that this element will have completely transformed into another element after 2,000 years. If the scientist finds very little of the isotope and a great deal of the element it turns into, then he or she knows that the rock and the fossil found in it is almost 2,000 years old.
Why do some flowers smell like perfume?
Different chemicals in plants and flowers called essential oils give them their special scents. Flowers have fragrances so they can attract the creatures they need for cross-pollination. Some of the insects and other animals that feed from flowers have keen senses of smell. Bees, for instance, have sensitive odor detectors in their antennae, so most bee flowers are scented. Flowers that open only at night are often strongly scented. To help the creatures that feed from them like moths find them in the dark, Not all flowers have pretty scents, though. Some flowers actually smell like rotten meat or other decaying matter in order to attract flies. Flies usually lay their eggs in decaying materials because that's what hatched fly larvae. The immature stage of a fly, feed on, therefore. Flies are drawn to plants that look and smell, to the fly, anyway, like garbage. Bats that feed on plants are also attracted to flowers that have what we would consider unpleasant scents.
Why are leopards spotted?
Like the fur of many animals, the leopard's coat is a form of camouflage. Camouflage helps animals blend in with their environments, making them less visible to predators, the animals that hunt them, and prey, the creatures they hunt. Mostly found in the forests of Africa and Asia, leopards, which hunt in trees and on the ground, blend in with the dappled sunlight shining through leafy tree branches and other plant life. Melanin is the organic chemical responsible for the pigmentation or color of animal and human skin. The more pigmentation, the darker the color. Black panthers are really leopards that have melanism, a condition of excess pigmentation. If you look closely at a black panther, careful. You may be able to see the same spots that a normal leopard has against a very dark background. Because leopards are mostly nocturnal, resting during the day and active at night, this dark coloration causes little problem for black panthers.
Why is the sky blue?
The white light of the sun consists of many wavelengths. When seen separately, each wavelength corresponds with a different color. The air molecules and particles of matter that make up our atmosphere scatter some of the sun's light as it travels to Earth. Especially the shorter wavelengths that give us the color blue. Coming to us from all angles in the sky, these light waves make the sky appear blue.
Should I pop a blister?
Just like scabs, blisters appear for good reasons. When skin is injured by burns or irritating chemicals, like poison ivy, or friction. From the repeated rubbing of stiff new shoes on your feet, for instance, your body produces a cushion of fluid under the damaged area to protect the new skin cells that are growing below to repair the spot. So popping or removing a blister takes this protective covering away. It is better to leave a blister alone and keep the damaged skin clean. A band-aid can be used to cushion the spot. A blister may break on its own. If not, the fluid will be absorbed back into the body once it's no longer needed.
How can fish breathe underwater?
just like people and, indeed, all animals. Fish need to take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide to survive. And while oxygen isn't as plentiful in water as it is in the air, there is enough dissolved oxygen in water to allow fish, and all other water creatures, to live. Fish conduct the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide with the help of gills. Breathing organs consisting of flaps of tissue located on the outside of the fish's body. Gills are loaded with tiny blood vessels called capillaries. It is these vessels that take in oxygen from the water and transport it to other blood vessels that distribute it where it's needed in the fish's body. The gill capillaries also bring carbon dioxide from other vessels to the gills, where it is then returned to the water.
What's wrong with your eyes if you're color blind?
The back of your eye, the retina, is lined with two special types of nerve cells, both named because of their shapes. Rods see black and white and work well in poor light, while cones see colors and fine details, but only in bright light. When you see an object, each rod and cone cell sends a signal to the brain's sight center, where information about color, form, shading, and light combine to create a visual image. Cones contain substances that respond separately to each of the colors red, green, or blue, which combine to make other colors. When a person is color blind, he or she is usually missing some of these substances in his or her cones. It is very rare that someone has none of these substances and sees everything in shades of black, white, and gray. The most common form of color blindness is the inability to see. The difference among some shades of green and some shades of red. The condition usually doesn't cause many problems in everyday life, though it is important to learn if a child has the defect as soon as possible, because the color red is often used as a danger signal, as in traffic lights, for example. Many more males than females are color blind, and the condition is inherited.
What is a reptile?
Reptiles are cold-blooded vertebrate animals with scales, shields, or plates covering their bodies. They include snakes, lizards, alligators, crocodiles, and turtles. There are around 6,000 living reptile species. Dinosaurs are among the many extinct types of reptiles. And while they prefer warmer climates, reptiles can be found all over the world. Most reptile babies develop in eggs with a hard outer shell that have been laid by the female. A few develop in eggs within the mother's body.
Can pets see what's on television?
When dogs and cats look at the television, they don't see the same things that you do. They can see little or no color and can't identify objects that appear on the flat screen. But they are attracted to the movement that they see on television. Action on the screen probably stirs their hunting instincts, making them think they are watching small, scurrying prey. Dogs and cats may also show interest in some of the sounds that come from television shows. A dog barking on TV may make your pet dog bark back. Or a ringing doorbell in a TV show might prompt your dog to get up and go to the door.
How do telephones work?
All sound is made by the back and forth movement, or vibration, of objects. When an object vibrates, it makes the molecules around it vibrate too, causing a ripple of motion known as a sound wave, which can travel through air, water, and solid materials. A telephone has vibrating parts, a disc in the mouthpiece and one in the earpiece that turn voice sounds into electrical signals that can travel along telephone wires and then turn back into sound again. Phones are usually connected to wires because they run on electricity. When you pick up a phone, a low electrical current allows you to dial the series of numbers that will connect you to the phone of a friend, for example. Each number on the phone has its own special electrical signal. And when the right numbers are combined, they can exactly identify your friend's phone line. A local telephone office receives this information when you dial and sends your call in the right direction. Call signals to places close by travel along wires or cables, buried underground or strung high in the air between supports. But when the person you call is very far away, the electrical signals sent from your phone are changed into invisible waves of energy called microwaves, which can travel long distances through the air. These waves are sent through space to communication satellites that orbit the world, which bounce them back to Earth, extending the wave's travel distance. An antenna at a receiving station near the home of your friend picks up the waves and changes them to electrical signals once more. They travel by cable to the telephone office that services your friend's neighborhood, where his or her number is identified. A signal is then sent to your friend's phone to make it ring. The entire process from dialing to ringing takes just a few seconds. When your friend answers the phone, a microphone in its mouthpiece contains a plastic disc that vibrates, turning his or her message into electrical signals that travel along the same path as before. A speaker in the earpiece of your phone receives the electrical signals, which vibrate another plastic disc that changes them back into sound. Two circuits from microphone to speaker are created, and you can talk back and forth with your friend. The next time you use the phone, think of the remarkable process that makes it possible.
Why do worms come out after it rains?
Go outside near any patch of dirt on a warm summer afternoon after a rainfall, and you are sure to find plenty of earthworms on driveways and sidewalks. Scientists are not certain why this happens, but the worms may emerge from the soil to escape from the rainwater that has filled their tunnel homes. While earthworms require a certain amount of moisture, they can drown if they're submerged in water. Unfortunately, their escape from the rain-soaked soil onto a warm driveway can also prove deadly. If the sun comes out before a worm can make it back to some dirt, it can get dried out.